You ever give everything you've got to a company, your time, your energy, your weekends, even your sanity, only to realize years later they never actually saw you? My name's Riley Hartman. I'm 38 years old, and until recently, I was a senior solutions architect at a mid-sized tech firm called AtriaPoint Systems. 8 years of my life went into that place. I built the infrastructure that held the whole consulting branch together, ran client systems at 2 in the morning, pitched our biggest accounts to skeptical investors, and even pulled off a last-minute recovery that saved a $6 million deal we nearly fumbled because someone higher up didn't check their facts. You'd think that kind of effort meant something, but no, not there. At AtriaPoint, effort didn't equal respect, it just made you easier to take for granted. So there I was, sitting at my desk on a Friday afternoon in late March, sipping cold coffee and waiting for the quarterly bonus confirmation that, truth be told, I'd already mentally counted on. I don't live above my means, but I'd been budgeting for that $12,500 payout like clockwork. I opened the portal, clicked on the bonus report, and all I saw was a single line of text. Bonus. Rolled over due to internal budget shifts. That was it. No signature, no justification, just a footnote at the bottom of an HR memo sent by Leela Monroe, who I knew didn't write it. She was just the messenger. I stared at the screen like it might refresh and correct itself, but deep down, I already knew what it meant. This wasn't an error. It was a message. Nathan Vale, my VP, didn't say a word. No email, no call, no explanation. Classic Nathan. Always there to take credit when things went right, always conveniently silent when something got ugly. I'd spent years watching him navigate meetings like a chess match, pushing his own narrative and casually erasing mine. He'd present my work as team contributions, make decisions based on my research without looping me in, and then smile like we were all in this together. I used to tell myself it was politics, that I wasn't good at playing the game. But that afternoon, I stopped pretending. It wasn't that I didn't know how to play, it's that I never wanted to win in a rigged system. And this bonus stunt, that was the last straw. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was the insult behind it, the dismissiveness, the absolute disregard for everything I'd done for them. I sat back in my chair and let the silence of the office soak in. Around me, other teams were wrapping up the week, laughing, scheduling happy hours, some even already packing for vacations they'd booked with bonuses they had actually received. And there I was, being told again that my work didn't matter, that I was just a cog, replaceable, forgotten. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but it wasn't panic. It was something sharper, more focused. It was clarity. I thought about all the little signs I'd ignored. The promotion I never got even after leading 3 major system launches, the way Nathan introduced me to clients as one of our engineers instead of by my title, the time I stayed late to troubleshoot a failing server while he took off early to beat traffic before a long weekend. Every moment, every slight, every time I swallowed my pride because I believed that if I just worked harder, they'd finally see me, they all came rushing back like a wave I'd been holding at bay for years. I felt foolish, and I hated that. But I also felt something else. Free. I wasn't going to fight for that bonus. I wasn't going to schedule a meeting to plead my case or try to justify my value. I'd already done that, over and over again, and each time they'd nodded, smiled, and pushed me back in line. Not this time. I was done letting other people define my worth. I looked out the window at the city skyline and realized I didn't belong here anymore. I'd outgrown this job, this team, this entire company. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to prove it. Not to them, but to myself. Because if they couldn't recognize what I was worth, I was going to show them what it looks like when someone builds something of their own and takes back everything they were denied. If you've ever worked under someone who smiles to your face while slowly cutting your influence behind your back, then you already understand who Nathan Vale is. He wasn't some snarling villain or openly hostile boss. No, Nathan was much slicker than that. He played the long game. Polished, polite, and always strategic, he had this way of cloaking every slight in flattery. He'd say things like, "You're such a great team player, Riley," or "You're the glue that holds this place together." And for a while, I believed him. Until I started noticing that glue doesn't get promotions. It just gets used to hold things up for everyone else. Nathan loved to brand my work as collaborative wins. Anytime I built a new tool, created client dashboards, or wrote back-end scripts that saved the company from scrambling mid-demo, he'd present it to leadership with a carefully worded statement. Our team worked hard on this. But the team was just me, usually working late into the night while others clocked out at 5. I didn't mind the grind. I believed in the mission. I thought if I kept delivering results, eventually I'd rise with them. Instead, I watched guys like Marcus Trent get promoted right in front of me. Marcus couldn't troubleshoot a login failure without asking me where the logs were, but he had the gift of gab, and that was enough. I'll never forget the moment that finally broke the illusion. A new junior analyst joined. His name was Brendan, fresh out of grad school, bright but green. Nathan asked me to mentor him, which I did gladly. I walked him through our systems, taught him how our architecture worked, and even gave him access to my custom diagnostic tools. 3 months later, Brendan was named technical lead on a project I had single-handedly designed and launched 6 months earlier. I found out about it from a company-wide Slack announcement. Nathan's only comment? "You're such a great example, Riley. You lift others up." It felt like a slap. Carmen Zhao, my closest colleague, and one of the few people who actually saw me, used to joke that I was the invisible backbone of AtriaPoint. "You're the ghost in the machine," she'd say, laughing over microwave noodles in the break room. "If you ever quit, the whole place would glitch for days." It was comforting in the moment, but deep down, I hated how accurate it was. I wasn't seen. I was just depended on. And the worst part? I let them do it. I kept showing up, kept fixing the bugs, kept solving the problems nobody else understood, thinking someone would eventually say, "We can't afford to lose her." Instead, I became the person they assumed would always be there to clean up the mess. There was this unspoken rule at AtriaPoint. People like Nathan got to climb, while people like me were expected to carry. Every time I tried to advocate for myself, it turned into a professional development conversation. "You need to be more strategic," he'd say, or "You're too technical to lead at the executive level." It was always just vague enough to shut me down without giving me anything I could push back on. And every time, I'd go back to my desk, hurt and confused, wondering what I was missing. The answer? I wasn't missing anything. I was just inconvenient to the narrative they wanted to protect. Eventually, I stopped sharing new ideas in meetings. I stopped volunteering for projects. I stopped waiting for recognition. Instead, I started documenting quietly. Every script I wrote, every platform enhancement, every architecture diagram, I kept clean copies. I backed up client feedback that mentioned me by name. I noted which decisions I influenced, even when someone else claimed the spotlight. And I watched, silently, as they kept promoting the performers while leaning harder on me to keep the wheels turning. They thought I was still loyal, still blind to the game. But I wasn't. I was paying attention. The thing about being underestimated for so long is that it teaches you to observe everything. The tone of a meeting, the way people phrase credit, the way someone's name is included on a slide deck they had nothing to do with. I learned more about corporate politics from being excluded than I ever could have from being in the room. And when you learn how the machine works, you learn how to take it apart. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the loud, dramatic way. I was focused, clear, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. Because they'd treated me like a silent fixture in the background for years. What they didn't realize is that I'd been building the foundation of something new the whole time. Carmen once said I was the backbone of AtriaPoint, but bones don't stay buried forever, and soon the skeleton they ignored was going to walk out the door, with their clients following right behind. If you've ever worked under someone who smiles to your face while slowly cutting your influence behind your back, then you already understand who Nathan Vale is. He wasn't some snarling villain or openly hostile boss. No, Nathan was much slicker than that. He played the long game. Polished, polite, and always strategic, he had this way of cloaking every slight in flattery. He'd say things like, "You're such a great team player, Riley," or "You're the glue that holds this place together." And for a while, I believed him. Until I started noticing that glue doesn't get promotions, it just gets used to hold things up for everyone else. Nathan loved to brand my work as collaborative wins. Anytime I built a new tool, created client dashboards, or wrote back-end scripts that saved the company from scrambling mid-demo, he'd present it to leadership with a carefully worded statement. Our team worked hard on this. But the team was just me, usually working late into the night while others clocked out at 5. I didn't mind the grind. I believed in the mission. I thought if I kept delivering results, eventually I'd rise with them. Instead, I watched guys like Marcus Trent get promoted right in front of me. Marcus couldn't troubleshoot a login failure without asking me where the logs were. But he had the gift of gab, and that was enough. I'll never forget the moment that finally broke the illusion. A new junior analyst joined. His name was Brendan, fresh out of grad school, bright but green. Nathan asked me to mentor him, which I did gladly. I walked him through our systems, taught him how our architecture worked, and even gave him access to my custom diagnostic tools. 3 months later, Brendan was named technical lead on a project I had single-handedly designed and launched 6 months earlier. I found out about it from a company-wide Slack announcement. Nathan's only comment? "You're such a great example, Riley. You lift others up." It felt like a slap. Carmen Zhao, my closest colleague and one of the few people who actually saw me, used to joke that I was the invisible backbone of AtriaPoint. "You're the ghost in the machine," she'd say, laughing over microwave noodles in the break room. "If you ever quit, the whole place would glitch for days." It was comforting in the moment, but deep down, I hated how accurate it was. I wasn't seen. I was just depended on. And the worst part? I let them do it. I kept showing up, kept fixing the bugs, kept solving the problems nobody else understood, thinking someone would eventually say, "We can't afford to lose her." Instead, I became the person they assumed would always be there to clean up the mess. There was this unspoken rule at AtriaPoint. People like Nathan got to climb, while people like me were expected to carry. Every time I tried to advocate for myself, it turned into a professional development conversation. "You need to be more strategic," he'd say, or "You're too technical to lead at the executive level." It was always just vague enough to shut me down without giving me anything I could push back on. And every time I'd go back to my desk, hurt and confused, wondering what I was missing. The answer? I wasn't missing anything. I was just inconvenient to the narrative they wanted to protect. Eventually, I stopped sharing new ideas in meetings. I stopped volunteering for projects. I stopped waiting for recognition. Instead, I started documenting quietly. Every script I wrote, every platform enhancement, every architecture diagram, I kept clean copies. I backed up client feedback that mentioned me by name. I noted which decisions I influenced, even when someone else claimed the spotlight. And I watched silently as they kept promoting the performers while leaning harder on me to keep the wheels turning. They thought I was still loyal, still blind to the game, but I wasn't. I was paying attention. The thing about being underestimated for so long is that it teaches you to observe everything. The tone of a meeting, the way people phrase credit, the way someone's name is included on a slide deck they had nothing to do with. I learned more about corporate politics from being excluded than I ever could have from being in the room.
And when you learn how the machine works, you learn how to take it apart. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the loud, dramatic way. I was focused, clear, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. Because they treated me like a silent fixture in the background for years. What they didn't realize was that I'd been building the foundation of something new the whole time. Carmen once said I was the backbone of AtriaPoint. But bones don't stay buried forever. And soon, the skeleton they ignored was going to walk out the door with their clients following right behind.
I didn't storm out. I didn't flip a table or send a dramatic all-hands email. That kind of exit might feel good for a day, but it doesn't build anything. Real power, it's quiet, intentional. And that's how my plan started. Softly, carefully, the same way you'd open a creaky door in the middle of the night. I formed an LLC and named it StratusVale Strategies, after my late father's Air Force call sign, Stratus. He used to say, "Stay above the clouds and they'll never see you coming." It felt right. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming my time, my work, and my name. So I moved in silence, and I didn't look back. It began with backups. Nothing suspicious, just methodical. I started archiving the custom middleware scripts I'd written line by line, copying them to a secure drive at home. These weren't company property. I had written every line of that code on my personal machine during evenings and weekends, often because AtriaPoint didn't give us the infrastructure we needed. Our employee handbook was clear. Unless something was built with company equipment, on company time, and under explicit assignment, it wasn't theirs. And that was fine by me, because I'd been meticulous from the beginning. Everything I built had a clean version, my version, and I knew the agreement better than their legal team probably did. Next came the templates. Email automations, onboarding sequences, API call workflows. I'd spent years refining those behind the scenes. The sales team used them every week, probably never realizing where they came from. I anonymized and stripped anything that tied them to AtriaPoint, ran simulations at home, and rewrote the documentation. The tools were mine. I was just finally giving them a better home. I even rebuilt the client analytics dashboard I'd created, this time with a cleaner interface and a faster response time. At the office, it took 15 seconds to load a single report. At home, on my sandbox environment, it loaded in under 2. Efficiency was the best kind of vengeance. While Nathan and the rest of the exec team were busy posturing in weekly meetings, I was quietly laying the foundation of something better. At night, I worked in a dim corner of my home office. One old desk lamp, 2 monitors, and a growing confidence I hadn't felt in years. The name StratusVale became more than just a placeholder LLC. It started to feel like a mission. I bought the domain, set up a private Git repository, and registered encrypted email accounts. I wasn't rushing. I was preparing. And each day I spent in that fluorescent corporate office just made me more certain that I was done asking for recognition from people who couldn't even spell the word innovation. But I wasn't reckless. I didn't touch anything confidential, didn't take client data, didn't download reports. That wasn't the point. My value wasn't in what they owned, it was in what I built from scratch. They'd been profiting off my work for years while ignoring the person behind it. Now I was separating the two. I started running time trials, building modular components that could scale, and testing frameworks against simulated data. Carmen called it my ghost system. It mirrored what we had at AtriaPoint, only better. Cleaner, no legacy bugs, no managerial bloat, just pure performance. I knew that once it was ready, I wouldn't need to steal anything. I'd just outclass them. The last piece was discipline. I told no one. Not Carmen, not my sister, not even my partner. Secrecy wasn't about mistrust, it was about protection. The fewer people who knew, the less chance of exposure. I smiled at work, hit my deadlines, nodded in meetings, played the part. Meanwhile, at home, StratusVale was growing. It had a CRM with full automation, a content engine, client journey maps, and a scalable billing module. Most startups would kill for a tech stack like that. I built it in my spare time, fueled by quiet fury and cheap coffee.
The key was never letting them see it coming. If I'd gone loud, they would have blocked me, accused me, painted me bitter. But by the time they figured it out, it would already be done. My systems would be running, my LLC would be active, and my next move wouldn't be a resignation, it would be a redirection. The secret door was already open, and I was almost ready to walk through it.
That weekend was a blur of coffee, quiet focus, and a kind of electric clarity I hadn't felt in years. While the rest of the world settled into their Saturday routines, I was on a mission. Carmen had just turned in her notice 2 days earlier, and when I told her what I'd been building, she didn't even blink. "About time," she said, rolling up her sleeves. Carmen wasn't just a colleague. She was the only person at AtriaPoint who ever treated me like a peer, not a tool. So when she offered to help me finish the launch, I let her in. Just her, no one else. We started with the basics: branding, site structure, legal disclaimers. Carmen had a knack for visual design and understood how to present complex systems in a way that looked clean and confident. We built out the entire client-facing portal, secure logins, support chat integration, and a knowledge base that made onboarding seamless. I configured the backend while she mocked up the front end, switching between Canva, Figma, and code without missing a beat. We named modules, stress-tested workflows, and set up encrypted communication channels. I'd never launched something so fast, but it wasn't rushed. It was precise. And it was personal. By late Saturday, StratusVale's main platform was live, scrubbed, tested, and cloaked from public search engines. It wasn't about hiding, it was about timing. I wanted control over when and how it was discovered. Until then, I needed it airtight. So we installed firewall rules, sandboxed the client portal behind multi-factor authentication, and verified the SSL layers ourselves. Carmen even helped draft placeholder text for our future testimonials. "Might as well be ready," she joked, her eyes tired but lit up with adrenaline. Neither of us had slept more than a few hours, but the energy in that room made up for it. The final piece was automation. I had already built the scripts that pulled sanitized, opt-in client performance data from AtriaPoint's old CRM. Now I refined the pipeline. Using an open-source relay tool I'd modified months ago, I scheduled periodic syncs into my private vault. No identifiers, no proprietary assets, just the frameworks I'd created, the workflows I'd refined, and the metrics that proved our value. These were clients I had built from the ground up, relationships I had maintained, often without support. Their engagement with me was voluntary, and the data they allowed me to keep had been legally cleared. I wasn't stealing, I was saving what was mine. For email campaigns, Carmen suggested we use SendSlate, a lightweight client engagement platform we'd toyed with before. By Sunday morning, we had drafted and pre-scheduled an entire welcome sequence. The emails weren't pushy or flashy, just thoughtful, transparent, and clear about what StratusVale offered. They explained the benefits, highlighted our platform's speed and simplicity, and reinforced the relationships we'd already built. We added a calendar link for discovery calls, embedded explainer videos, and created a real-time status board for transparency. Clients wouldn't be guessing what came next, they'd be guided through it. By Sunday night, StratusVale was no longer just an idea, it was a fully operational agency. Nimble, secure, and ready. Carmen leaned back in her chair, looked around my tiny apartment, and said, "You just did in 48 hours what it took AtriaPoint 4 years to fail at." I didn't laugh, I just stared at the monitor, watching the system logs blink back at me. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel at work: ownership. Not just of the code or the process, but of the future I was building. One line of script, one design choice, one connection at a time. We didn't toast champagne or take selfies. That wasn't the kind of launch this was. It was quiet, deliberate, and rooted in years of being overlooked. While they were sleeping off their weekend brunches or prepping Monday status meetings, I was preparing to exit their system entirely. The syncs were running, the client portal was locked and polished, and the welcome emails were queued. All I had to do now was wait. Not for permission, but for the right moment to show them that the person they underestimated for nearly a decade had already outgrown the place they thought she'd never leave. I showed up on Slack like it was any other Monday. No change in tone, no hint of what had just taken place over the weekend. My status read, "Online, reviewing Q3 dashboards," and I even dropped a couple of emojis in the project channel to stay on brand. Meanwhile, inside that polished silence, everything was falling apart. AtriaPoint CRM was down, not glitchy down. Frozen queries, error screens, login timeouts. I saw the first message from Marcus in the engineering thread. Anyone else seeing timeout errors? 2 minutes later, another ping. This is system-wide. I just lost client session data. I said nothing, just watched it unfold like someone rewinding a movie I'd already seen the end of. Then came the group email. Nathan, never one to handle chaos gracefully, blasted out a thread with the subject line, "Urgent, CRM backup protocols." His tone sounded calm enough, but I could read the panic behind it. "Does anyone have a clean backup from this quarter?" he wrote. "We're seeing widespread latency and data gaps on all active accounts. Engineering is investigating." I stared at the screen for a full minute before closing the email and sipping my coffee. The answer, of course, was no. There were no clean backups because the scripts that kept things running were mine, and they had walked out with me. By 9:30, Slack was a war zone. Engineering was pointing fingers at DevOps. DevOps was blaming an external API injection. The truth? The system hadn't been breached or sabotaged. It had simply lost the person who kept it functioning. Me. They thought I was just another piece of the machine, a role, a title, replaceable. But now, the gears were grinding without the one part they never understood, because I was the one who built half those gears in the first place. They were discovering, in real time, that systems don't run on titles. They run on talent. And talent doesn't stay when it's taken for granted. Around 10:15, my personal inbox pinged. 3 messages, all from clients. The subject lines varied, but the tone was the same. Confusion, delay in reports, missing metrics, transaction logs showing discrepancies. One message came from Julie Tran at Wexler and Pine. "Hi, Rachel. We're seeing some oddities on the campaign dashboard. Is your team available for a quick look?" Your team. That was the moment it clicked. These clients didn't care about AtriaPoint. They cared about who solved their problems, who responded, who built the tools they relied on, and they knew exactly who that was. I wrote back for my new domain, rachel@stratusvale.io. Short, polite, professional. "Hi, Julie. Yes, we're standing by. We're aware of the inconsistencies and can walk your team through a diagnostic this afternoon. We'll send a booking link shortly." I sent similar responses to the other 2 and queued up the automated welcome packets we had prepared the night before. Carmen helped me polish the messaging so it sounded less like an ad and more like a lifeline. Because in many ways, it was. These teams weren't switching agencies. They were just following the person who had been holding them together the whole time. Back at AtriaPoint, the chaos hadn't slowed down. Marcus was now in the IT channel begging for manual exports. One of the data analysts posted a screenshot of a blank dashboard with the caption, "$8 million client pipeline just disappeared." Someone else suggested restoring from January backups. Nathan replied with a passive-aggressive, "Unacceptable. This is client-facing. Get it fixed." It was the same energy they always brought to the table. Demand answers, offer no solutions, and somehow pretend it was beneath them to understand how any of it actually worked. But now, they were locked out of their own house, and the only person who knew where the keys were had already moved across the street. By noon, Carmen and I were doing back-to-back onboarding calls from my kitchen table. The clients were frustrated, but not with us. In fact, most of them seemed relieved. "Honestly, I'm glad we're working with you directly now," one exec said. "You were the only one who ever explained things in plain English." Another asked if they could bring over an additional vertical once we got their data stabilized. I muted myself and just looked at Carmen. She smiled and whispered, "It's happening." And she was right. What started as a whisper was turning into a wave. Not because I burned anything down, but because I built something better. And they saw it. 2 days after Jason's call, an email popped into my inbox from a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line was bland, but the contents were anything but. It was a cease and desist letter, 4 dense pages of corporate rage dressed in legal language. AtriaPoint accused me of system tampering, unauthorized access, and my personal favorite, unethical solicitation of protected client relationships. I laughed out loud before I even finished reading it. Their desperation was showing, and it was sloppy. They threw every accusation they could think of at the wall, hoping something would stick. It was the legal version of a tantrum. I forwarded the entire thing to Gaffney Lee, my attorney, and one of the sharpest minds I know. She called me 20 minutes later, still chuckling. "They're bluffing," she said. "Hard. I've seen messier intimidation tactics from college landlords." Daphne had reviewed every step of my exit plan weeks before I even activated it. We'd gone through the employee agreement line by line, the scripts I'd used, all open-source derivatives I personally customized and hosted on my own hardware, the workflows built during off hours on my personal machine, and, most importantly, AtriaPoint's own policies never claimed IP ownership over internal tools unless explicitly commissioned, which none of mine were. "Let them bark," Daphne said. "You've got receipts, and they've got nothing but a bruised ego and a broken system." I trusted her completely, so I did exactly what she said. Nothing. No panic, no counter email, just logged it, filed it, and moved on. But the universe wasn't done yet. That same afternoon, something beautiful happened. Terrell Boone, the founder of Boone Strategic Partners and one of AtriaPoint's biggest former clients, posted a story on LinkedIn. It wasn't just a polite "we've moved on" note. It was a public testimonial, naming StratusVale Strategies as a forward-thinking, client-first firm led by someone who understands modern infrastructure better than any vendor we've worked with. Then came the punch. Terrell added, "AtriaPoint's archaic tech stack was holding us back for years. Riley Daniels gave us the clarity and control we didn't know we were missing. The transition was seamless. The future looks better already." That post hit like thunderclap. Within an hour, it was shared by 5 other execs I'd worked with over the years. My inbox exploded. CMOs, IT directors, vendor partners, even a few recruiters from companies I'd never heard of. All congratulating me, all curious, all asking for a conversation. It was surreal. For years, I was the woman they leaned on behind the scenes, the one they trusted quietly but never celebrated publicly. Now, here I was, with my name attached to a growing company and a public reputation that no HR performance review could suppress. The best part? Every sentence of Terrell's post was true. I didn't poach anyone. I didn't steal data. I simply made myself available on my terms, and people chose to follow. That wasn't unethical. That was earned trust. A few people warned me the post might escalate things, and maybe it did. But I wasn't afraid. What could they really do? Drag me into court for outgrowing them? Accuse me of taking back the very tools they ignored until they broke? The truth was, I had already won. Not just because of the clients or the buzz or the revenue, but because I had finally stopped waiting for someone, like Nathan or Jason, to recognize what I brought to the table. I had built my own damn table, and now people were asking for a seat at it. Carmen and I spent that evening reviewing new client inquiries and laughing over a bottle of ginger ale like it was champagne. "They should have just given you the bonus," she joked. "Would have saved them a whole lot of trouble." I smiled, but my mind was already thinking bigger. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. This was about vision now, growth, creating the kind of company I always wished existed, one where builders like me didn't get pushed into silence, where good work didn't disappear behind someone else's PowerPoint, where threats didn't scare us, because we were finally, undeniably free. The fallout came fast and loud. It started with a client email on Monday morning, then 2 more by mid-afternoon. By Tuesday, 3 of AtriaPoint's largest accounts, Boone Strategic, Alira Medical, and Kelsen Group, had officially terminated their contracts. The tone was almost identical across each message. "Our business needs have shifted. We'll be moving in a new direction." Except everyone at AtriaPoint knew exactly what that direction was. The board called an emergency session, trying to figure out how 3 key revenue streams had walked out the door practically overnight. But I knew the real reason. They didn't walk. They followed. By Wednesday, I got a message from Leela, quietly sent from her personal account.
Just a single screenshot of an internal Slack channel, no caption needed. In it, Nathan was spiraling, blaming the collapse on rogue engineers and unauthorized back-end protocols. Someone replied, asking, "Didn't Riley build that system?" And the thread went dead. Classic Nathan. Deflect, distort, then disappear when cornered. I didn't feel satisfaction, just clarity. I didn't need to burn the building down, I just had to stop holding up the beams. Marcus, the guy they promoted over me twice, resigned that Friday. Apparently, he froze up in front of the board when asked how the CRM had gone so long without a backup. They were hoping he had answers. He didn't even have admin access. All those months he spent copying my workflow notes and taking credit in stand-ups, none of it meant anything now. Without the scaffolding I built, he was lost. It wasn't about revenge, it was about exposure. Quiet, unfiltered truth surfacing after years of being buried under spin. Meanwhile, Carmen was thriving. She'd stepped fully into her role leading client operations at StratusVale, and it was like watching someone step into sunlight after years in shadow. That same week, she brought in 2 new accounts on her own, clients who said they'd never even heard of StratusVale until they saw what happened on LinkedIn. That post from Terrell Blum, it had legs. Carmen joked that the best marketing campaign we ever launched was just me finally standing up for myself. I told her it wasn't a campaign. It was an overdue correction. We were still small, still scrappy, but now the wheels were turning faster. Clients trusted us because we moved with clarity. No jargon, no grandstanding, just clean systems, thoughtful service, and a team that actually listened. We didn't have a bloated leadership chart. We didn't need to. Everyone on our team contributed because they wanted to, not because they were angling for visibility. That's what I'd always hoped to build. Not a fortress, but a workshop. A space where people could show up, do their best work, and be seen for it. And me? I didn't gloat. I built. I adjusted workflows, helped onboard new clients, kept documentation airtight, and answered questions personally. I stayed in it not because I didn't trust the team, but because I loved the process. I always had. AtriaPoint had just found ways to make me hate doing the thing I loved. But now, that joy was back, steady and unshakable. The buzz, the chaos, even the legal threats, they were just noise now. I wasn't working to prove anything anymore. I was working because this finally felt like mine. The irony still sits with me. All those years, Nathan used to say I was too quiet for leadership, said I didn't know how to make waves. What he never realized was that quiet doesn't mean weak. It means we're listening, planning, watching what everyone else ignores. The overlooked are rarely idle. We're just collecting information, building pressure. And when we finally move, we don't make noise for attention. We make impact. They underestimated that. They underestimated me. I used to think you needed someone to vouch for you to move forward in your career. A mentor, a sponsor, someone higher up to open the door. But maybe what you really need is to know your worth so well you stop waiting for permission. You build the door yourself, and when it opens, you walk through it without looking back.
It came through just after 7 a.m., an email from Jason Merrick with the subject line, "One more conversation." I stared at it for a moment, not out of curiosity, but out of that strange reflex we all have after years of corporate gaslighting. Part of me expected some half-hearted apology, maybe another bonus offer, or a promise to mend fences. But it was just a glorified sales pitch in disguise. Jason was proposing a merger. He framed it as unifying complementary visions. In plain English, it meant, "We're bleeding out, and we need your systems, your talent, and your clients back." I didn't even reply. Instead, I opened our revamped StratusVale homepage, took a screenshot of the new tagline, designed by people who were once ignored, and posted it to my LinkedIn. No caption, no tagging, just the image and that one line. It caught like wildfire. Comments poured in, mostly from peers who had sat in meetings just like mine, been bypassed just like me, and finally saw someone break the cycle. That post wasn't about gloating,
It was about planting a flag and letting the rest of the world know we were no longer interested in sitting at their table. We'd built our own. The same week, we passed $600K in contracted revenue. $600,000! And we weren't even trying to scale fast. These were real, retained contracts, mostly from companies who either left AtriaPoint or knew someone who had. Our Slack channel was buzzing nonstop. New integrations were going live. Carmen was juggling onboarding with client ops like she'd been doing it for decades. And then came the best part, Melissa. Carmen brought her in from one of the firms we'd onboarded, and it was instant magic. Melissa was a DevOps lead who had quietly held her last company together without recognition, much like we had. And now she was building systems that made ours even stronger. Every day started to feel like breathing again, not gasping for air during some toxic Monday stand-up, not second-guessing every sentence in an email, not rehearsing how to phrase a pitch so some insecure exec wouldn't feel threatened. Just doing the work with people who had been through it, who didn't need to posture. There was a calm power in that. StratusVale wasn't just an escape plan anymore. It had become something sharper, something cleaner. We were proof that there's life and real success on the other side of corporate betrayal. Carmen and I used to joke back at AtriaPoint that we were bulletproof interns, always doing the heavy lifting, but never with a title. Now we were leaders, not because we demanded respect, but because we built something worthy of it. We made space for others who'd been silenced, sidelined, and second-guessed. Every new hire was intentional, every system carefully configured. There was no hierarchy for hierarchy's sake. If someone had a better way, we listened. That was the quiet revolution we always hoped for. I heard through the grapevine that AtriaPoint was spiraling. Their consulting division had collapsed entirely. Clients didn't just leave, they warned others not to go back. Jason was apparently on sabbatical. Nathan had taken a role at a much smaller firm, one that didn't even use cloud integrations. I didn't chase down those updates, but they found me anyway. People love a good downfall. But I wasn't fixated on their ruin. I was focused on our momentum. The best revenge, after all, isn't a headline. It's thriving so well, they have to read about you just to know what winning looks like. Somewhere deep in the AtriaPoint archives, there's probably still a glowing HR file with my name on it. Team player, reliable, strong technical contributor, but never leader, never visionary, never indispensable. They never used those words because they didn't think I was listening. Or maybe they just didn't want to admit how much they relied on someone they never planned to promote. Either way, they gave me the one thing I needed, a reason to stop waiting for validation, to stop making myself small, and to start building walls that weren't made to keep people out, but to protect something finally, fully ours.
I stood outside our new office, a modest glass-front space tucked between a co-op bakery and a print shop that still used offset presses. It wasn't flashy. The furniture had history scratches, dents, and the kind of character you can't buy new. But inside, the air felt electric, charged with quiet purpose and gritty optimism. Carmen was already inside, laughing with Melissa over some client dashboard win. I took a breath and let it sink in. I wasn't just walking into work. I was walking into a version of myself that no longer waited for permission to matter. 8 years ago, I would have called this impossible. I thought success came from earning someone else's nod, from being dependable to a fault, from proving myself quietly in rooms where louder, less capable people got the credit. I lived off performance reviews that praised my team-first mindset, but never backed it with raises or promotions. I trained people who leapfrogged me. I solved crises that made other people look heroic. And all the while, I told myself that my day would come if I just kept my head down and my work excellent. But the truth is, in places like AtriaPoint, people like me are never meant to rise. We're meant to keep the lights on, not flip the switch. StratusVale changed that. StratusVale changed me.
Every piece of this company carries my fingerprints, from the API structures to the client onboarding cadence to the warm, clear way we communicate without jargon or arrogance. It's not a rebellion, it's a return to what I've always been capable of, just no longer filtered through someone else's hierarchy. When I started backing up my scripts and sandboxing my architecture at home, I wasn't plotting revenge. I was planting roots for something that would finally belong to me. They called me unprepared. They said I wasn't executive material. They rolled over my bonuses with canned HR copy and left me training juniors who didn't know the difference between an endpoint and an echo. But here I am, running a profitable company with zero venture debt and a client retention rate they could only dream of. And the best part? I sleep better. I laugh more. I no longer triple-check my tone before sending emails or rehearse how to ask for what I've already earned. I don't perform anymore. I just do the work. Jason never understood that loyalty isn't something you demand. It's something you nurture. Nathan thought gatekeeping was leadership. He never saw how badly the foundation cracked beneath his curated org chart. And Leela? I don't blame her. She was just another bystander too afraid to rock the boat. But me? I stopped trying to fit inside their broken system the moment I realized I could build my own. Leaving wasn't an act of defiance. It was an act of return to myself, to my values, to the vision I'd been forced to suppress for years. When I unlock the office each morning, I still get that flutter of nerves. Not fear, excitement. We're building something real here. Not just software or services, but trust, confidence. A model that lets brilliant people shine without politics muting their light. Carmen is leading operations with more clarity than any VP I ever worked under. Melissa's DevOps workflows make our rollout times smoother than any legacy team I've seen. And we've even started mentoring young women in tech. Women who might have ended up like I did if someone didn't show them there was another way. I didn't just quit AtriaPoint. I quit undervaluing myself. I quit shrinking to fit a mold that was never designed for builders, for thinkers, for the quiet ones who solve the problems no one else even sees coming. They lost a workhorse, but I gained a voice. And now, when people ask what StratusVale is, I tell them it's not just a business. It's a mirror reflecting back the lesson I wish someone had told me years ago. Know your worth before someone else decides it for you. Because once you reclaim that, really reclaim it, there's nothing they can take from you ever again.